So I think all of us can remember the tragic events that unfolded in Aurora, in Isla Vista, and Sandy Hook. They were caused by individuals that we later learned were lacking their full mental capabilities. James Holmes, shooter of the theater in Colorado, was reportedly seeing a psychiatrist who would treat schizophrenia. Larsa, perpetrator of Sandy Hook Elementary, struggled with basic emotions from early age. And Elliot Rogers, triggerman of UCSB shooting in 2014, had Asperger's and was taking medication. This is the information that was published by the American Public Health Association. Excuse me. There are tragic killings which often come up when we're talking about guns in America. And although it isn't hard to imagine why they could lead to anti-gun sentiment, I think it is somewhat impetuous, and it's an emotionally driven decision that we shouldn't be taking. In Chicago, for example, they have the strictest gun regulations there, and they have the highest homicide rates. This correlation is not unique. It also happens in other European countries, which I'll talk more about later. Yeah, I think the positive effects that should be resulting from gun regulation, from strict gun regulation, is, if not dangerously pernicious, at very least non-existent. So I'll bring myself to my point here. Severe regulation of firearms will fail to benefit society. Now, allow me to clarify what I mean by firearm, because it's not entirely trivial. We do not have universal agreement on the definition of the term, and it will depend on who you're talking with. For example, if you're talking with a judge, it would be different than the notion for the word for Billy or something. And if we are to get technical, under legal terminology, under Chapter 56 of Title 26 U.S. Code 5845, firearm has 8 categorical definitions. And if I define them all, it would take too long. So for simplicity, then I'll use the Oxford definition, which defines it as a firearm. A firearm is a rifle, pistol, or portable gun. I'd also like to clarify what I mean by fail to benefit society. I don't mean economically or socially or spiritually. What I'm referring to is strictly the well-being of the citizens. Now, I have 2 major reasons why restricting firearms won't benefit society. 1, it won't stop crime, and 2, it won't lessen the homicide rate. I'll elaborate on number 1. Restricting guns will be unsuccessful in stifling crime. In 2001, the Bureau of Statistics of the United States Department of Justice surveyed inmates and found that only 14% of them had bought the guns legally. In 2004, they repeated the study, and only 11% had bought them legally. Now, I was talking about European countries, or foreign countries. It turns out that Australia and England, which have virtually banned guns, have a much higher victimization rate. According to data published by the International Crime Victimization Survey in 1999, you were twice as likely to be a victim of contact crime, which included robbery, sexual assaults, and assaults by force. 4.1% in Australia, 3.6% in the UK, and 1.9% in the US. My second claim is that restricting guns will fail to diminish murder rates. There was a small arms survey in 2007, which estimated that about 83 to 97% there would be 83 to 97 out of 100 people had guns in the U.S., which is a remarkably high number, but the homicide rate had actually gone down. Also, the U.S. places only 25th or 28th out of 185 countries, ranked by the Office on Drugs and Crime. So to recap, severe restriction of firearms will fail to benefit society because it, one, doesn't restrict firearms. One fails to stifle crime, and two, it fails to stifle murder rates. Thanks.
All right, Henry, I like the references you had at the beginning to the mass killings that you cited, and you've got some good examples there. You kind of go with the opposite conclusion here, and you're trying to argue that people's reactions have been too quick, that they are jumping off too much to assume that controlling these problems requires controlling guns in some way. I thought that was okay. I'm not exactly sure why the firearms definition is necessary. You never come back to it and explain like there's any controversy about what people mean by firearms. I think there might be some question as to what kinds of regulations or legislation might be described as being effective or ineffective, and I think that's probably where you needed to do a little bit more definition. Same thing with fail to benefit. That just feels a little circular. I don't think you get anything from that. It does take you 2 minutes in the opening to get to your specific purpose statement. So in essence, you've got a 6-minute speech and a third of it's gone before you finally get to the point that you're trying to make. I think you need to get there a little bit faster on that. It was clearly stated, that was fine. The preview is okay, but the way the claims are phrased, they sound very similar to each other. It's like, one's apparently talking about general crime and the one's talking about murder. Those are distinguishing characteristics. But I think if you're going to make that the distinguishing characteristic, then you have to have a little bit more explanation as to how the statistics on each of those things work. And you're basically depending on the statistics in the supporting points to make your arguments. And I think you need to explain why those things mean the things that you're presenting. I think you have to explain a little bit more of the warrant on those particular points. You did a good job signposting those points at the beginning, like I said, in the preview. And you signposted them when you got to the content in the speech. Like I said, I think there needs to be more explanation of how those things are demonstrated by the evidence that you present. Now, the evidence you present, you've got a good example on the countries with Australia and England. You've got some nice information there that you're using to make that argument. You've got some statistical information that you're talking about when it comes to where criminals got their guns. I think you're missing the argument here that suggests the idea that restriction on legal access to guns would have an impact on criminals seems to be unrealistic, since they don't usually use legal channels to obtain their guns. That's the simple explanation of what's going on at that point. I think you need to make that a little bit clearer. But people, if they're listening carefully and they're good critical thinkers, they'll figure that out. Sometimes you got to lead people around a little bit more, and that's one of the things that's different about speeches than a paper. In a paper, maybe people will figure it out looking at it if they're thinking hard. Sometimes it has to be spoon-fed to the audience a little bit more. Let's see. I thought you did a good job citing most of your evidence. I think you could use a few more pieces of testimony that would help explain the information that you got. Like I said, that was, to me, the main issue that was problematic. You do a pretty good job in presenting. I thought maybe there's a little bit of reading, and because you spent so much time at the beginning, I kind of like the language that you have in the introduction. I thought there were some effective ways of describing things. You had a nice transition between your attention device and what the purpose statement was, but it's a little long, and you need to get to the point a little bit more effectively. And you used your time very effectively. Thank you.